So I'm here this morning to talk through the latest sort of position on the Graven Hill Masterplan. So what you see up here on the board is the current iteration or latest version of the Masterplan that we have. And we have focused on 4 particular areas which we know is of particular interest to people out on site, and also just to show where we are with the next phases of development. I think one important consideration, something that people need to understand, is that when Graven Hill originally had the planning consent, that has a finite life, and the consent itself actually expires in August 2022. So we have no choice other than to come forward and seek a refreshed master plan from the local authority. Before I go into the detail, just a little bit of history about Graven Hill for those who may not know it. So the site itself was brought forward in 2011 by the MOD, who were intending to sell out the site to your normal types of house builders, i.e. a Persimmon or a Taylor Wimpey, etc. However, around 2012, 2013, the government became very interested in self and custom build as a form of delivery. Cutting a very, very long story short, there was a ministerial direction that the site was to be sold from the Ministry of Defence to the Cherwell District Council. Wasn't given away, the site was subject to a market valuation and sold at that value. The council itself can't carry out commercial activities, and therefore it set up the Graven Hill Village Development Company, which is the company that I work for, as a residential and commercial developer to actually undertake delivery of the site itself. So that's a little bit of the history to it. In terms of the particular and specific areas, I'll deal with them as they're shown on the board for no particular reason other than that's the way they're there. So the first one is extra care. So we have, or just to explain to people, there's a difference in terms of what Graven Hill does. There's a master plan of homes, that's what we bring forward, and also employment land that we will bring forward. But as part of the planning consent, there are obligations upon us to deliver certain things as well, or to make available certain things. And one of these is a provision for extra care. So there is a requirement for about 67 extra care properties or units on the site. And there was a site allocated in the original master plan for them. With the passage of time and changes in legislation, etc., that site is not big enough to accommodate the number of units that we need to. So we've looked at increasing the frontage of that site to enable that provision of the affordable extra care. And just for information, the affordable extra care is a little bit different to the private operators, where you would go and buy a lease or buy an apartment in a private scheme. This is a means tested or income related, so you have to be on the housing register, is my understanding. You clearly need the care need, but it's really for those people who can't afford to go into the private accommodation that exists. In tandem with this, we're also looking at the location of the community centre, and there are pros and cons in terms of locations for all things, but what we've looked at is moving the community centre out to where the sports pitches and other play facilities are. There's a number of advantages we think to this. The first is that we've also an obligation to deliver a changing pavilion, and there is a potential to put these 2 buildings together. That would mean that there would be a larger facility, potentially a better facility because you're combining 2 budgets, but it also allows much more flexibility in the operation of that in use. Clearly in this position, it benefits from its access to the sports pitches, etc. It enables us to provide more car parking than would have been practicable within the village centre. And it also allows, because some functions clearly are going to be noisy, it allows for noisier functions to take place out here without the risk of noise pollution in the existing residential areas. So that in itself is the community centre. I then come to the pub, and I know this is probably the most controversial bit. I think everyone expected or thought that Graven Hill did not want a pub at Graven Hill. Graven Hill does want there to be a pub at Graven Hill. The difference between the pub and these other 2 is that they are planning obligations. The pub requires industry to come forward, so a commercial operator to come forward to purchase the land and build and operate a pub. We've had some interest. However, what's been apparent, we've been advertising this existing site since 2015, and there's been no substantive and material interest in it. We cannot simply leave sites sterile until someone may or may not come along at some point in the future. We engage with our agents and we engage with industry to say, well, to make a pub viable at Graven Hill, what would we need to do? And the clear feedback that's come is they need visibility from the main road. They wanted a slightly bigger site than the one that we currently had. They wanted the opportunity for more pub garden or beer space, that sort of thing. And clearly this location that we're now proposing also gives the advantage that it's much closer to the existing amenity space areas with the water ponds, etc., and the walks that are around there. So we do believe that is a much better potential location for the pub. And the final item is early years provision. Again, within the original master plan, we had made provision within the site for early years. Again, in terms of change in time, since 2011 when that master plan was approved, and 2021 where we are now, a lot has changed. And it became apparent when we were dealing with a number of operators, and we have one particular operator who's interested in this, that they wanted a larger site, they wanted more facility for early years play, and they also wanted to be still relatively close to the school, which suggested that this site would be ideal for them. So in summary, those are the primary changes that we are proposing to the master plan. In terms of the residential, if you compare it to the original master plan, you'll see that there is no real change. We've not encroached into any green space. So that is very, very similar to as it was. And in respect of the trajectory of the development, everyone will be familiar that this is where we are currently building. And in respect of the next phase, what we'll actually be doing is building a new road that comes along here, which we call at the moment the Western Spine Road, and into these sections of the development, which are affectionately known at the moment as 3A and 3B, but I'm sure we'll give them a slightly flashier marketing name at some point in the future. From there, we then move into this phase of development, and then down here, and then once that has been built out and sold, we move across to the eastern half of the development and build out in that direction there. Some people may have noticed that work has commenced out on the A41 on a Pioneer roundabout, which is the second roundabout for the scheme, and we're shortly also to commence construction of this road, which begins to open up the employment land. So hopefully that was of interest, and if there are any questions, happy to take them now, or would urge you to look at particular focus boards where we've blown up those particular areas. Thank you very much.